You are listening to the Empowering Working Moms podcast, Real Talk with Dr. Prianca Naik, a show to help professional moms in survival mode to take hold of their lives and thrive. If you're ready to take powerful action to create your best life, then this is the show for you. I'm your host, Dr. Prianca Naik, board-certified internal medicine physician and certified life coach. Now let's get to it and dive in. You are listening to the Empowering Working Moms podcast, Real Talk with Dr. Prianca Naik, episode number 4. Hello, ladies. I am so thrilled you're tuning in again today. I'm going to chat about a topic that negatively affects so many of us. It's called people pleasing. But the good news is there are solutions in store for you today. So many of us engage in people pleasing. If you have a hard time with boundaries, saying no, fear of being labeled as selfish, seeking other people's approval constantly, picking other people over yourself, doing things for others at your own personal expense, you are probably a people pleaser. So keep listening. Why are we people pleasers? Well, people pleasing is ingrained at such a young age. Babies and toddlers look for their parents' approval. We learn at a young age that performing often well earns praise. Repeating words as a baby elicits an applause or a smile from our parents. So we keep doing it, perhaps in increasing frequency. If you have a baby or toddler, make note of this and you'll see how naturally it comes. And then, of course, in school, if the teachers liked us, maybe we would get good grades. So subjective, right? Again, more fostering of external judgment and approval. We become conditioned to equate our self-worth with the approval of others. So it's no surprise that as adults, we highly value the opinions of others. And to take it a step further, we actually base our self-worth on this, on people-pleasing. Self-worth, which if you break down the word self and worth, we take that word literally, then it really should be based on ourselves, not others. And so in basing our self-worth on people-pleasing and others, we are truly giving away our own power, our power of our own feeling of who we are and how worthy we are. Approval of all those things that make us feel fulfilled and happy. We look for in others, but really, we need to find the answers within ourselves. We must pull in towards ourselves. So keep this in mind as we move through this episode. So often, clients come to me concerned about what other people think of them. This especially is common in medicine. People want to have a good reputation. As a doctor, they want to be liked by their superiors or administration at the hospital, and ultimately, of course, are trying to garner external approval. I'm going to tell you right now that engaging in this pattern actually is destructive, right? Because we're giving away our power, as I said. Basing our self-worth on others is just giving our happiness away to what's outside of us. One client was complaining about her boss who never seemed to be satisfied with this doctor's work. And on top of that, she was inconsistent in her policies, the boss that is, and this really seemed unfair, right? So my client wanted to make peace with her boss, have a symbiotic relationship, but the goal of making her boss happy with her was actually majorly out of her hands. Whatever outlook her boss was bringing to the table had honestly everything to do with her boss's narrative and really nothing to do with her. This was going to be whatever way it was, regardless of what this young, talented doctor did. We often people please as a way to avoid the discomfort of others' disapproval. So many of us have a hard time with dealing with discomfort when someone disagrees with us or someone doesn't like us. And again, I will remind you that people pleasing will deplete us and take our joy away. We cannot control anything outside of us. But as upsetting as that might be, remember, we can control ourselves and what goes on within us, and that is what's empowering. I remember pre-coaching, if I had some trouble at work or someone didn't like me, I would literally spend much of that day crying on and off, stressing myself out about, why so-and-so didn't like me or why did they say something bad about me. And I would spend so much time and energy worrying about this. And truly, everyone, they're just not going to like us, right? It's just not possible. And that's fine. We know this logically, but sometimes we still get upset when there are people who don't like us out there. And again, to reassure you, I'm going to tell you that the majority of someone's opinion of you is dictated by his or her story and not by the quality of person that you are. It has nothing to do with you. Another example of this, I had a South Asian client. Her mother-in-law told her husband that she didn't love him because she didn't cook him hot meals, that the wife didn't love him because she didn't cook him hot meals. I mean, this is insane. Am I right? But that's the mother-in-law story. Food equals love. Really, nothing about this had anything to do with the daughter-in-law, who, by the way, with cultural norms, would never be good enough. So the sooner that she realized this, that the narrative of her not loving her husband was really her mother-in-law's narrative, then the sooner she could find peace with herself and move on, right? We can all just move on with our lives. Another story I'm going to tell about my journey with people pleasing. Here goes. So for myriad reasons, I did not get into an Ivy League school, and I probably could have. That was my pre-coaching, pre-mindset, pre-mind management beliefs, etc. Right? That was my life before all that. I went to WashU in St. Louis, which is more than respectable as an undergrad institution. But that being said, this went down in history as a failure in my family. So couple that with a little bit of teenage angst, getting into trouble, right, with my born in India, Indian parents, and I was honestly the black sheep of my family for a while. Well, that, of course, laid the groundwork for me people-pleasing constantly. I was so insecure from this alleged failure, which obviously now I know that that wasn't a failure at all, but it got me to the point where I could not make decisions by myself. I would always consult my mother and my best friend, especially in my early 20s. And as an adult, I was seeking approval from my parents constantly, especially about my parenting choices. But of course, right, like I am doing things differently than my parents did. I take the good from them, and whatever I perceive as bad, I discard that. And a few years ago, I actually found myself wasting energy arguing with my mom, trying to get her to agree with me on my parenting methods. I mean, that's just, why would I do that? Like, she doesn't have to agree with me, right? And why do I feel the need for her to agree? Because of the people pleasing. And of course, I left that conversation feeling unhappy and depleted, right? I was giving my power away. I was giving my happiness away. And I truly realized that the solution to this was to turn within, knowing that the answers were within me and I can guide myself and follow my intuition, and I don't have to look outside of myself for approval or answers. And I began to adjust my approach. So now when they don't agree with me, I acknowledge that. I acknowledge the fact that they don't agree, and I move forward. They're entitled to their opinion and I'm entitled to mine. So what if I can focus on people pleasing myself? So I challenge you to, instead of worrying about what other people think, start worrying about what you think. When you're making a decision, ask yourself, does this choice align with who I am? Does this choice empower me? Does this choice show love to myself? Or what would I tell a friend to do? So asking myself these questions helps me to get out of people-pleasing and into my own fulfilled zone. Now, don't get me wrong, I still find myself slipping into my people-pleasing ways. But with awareness and practice, I can decrease it immensely. South Asian culture promotes success and having great life on paper, so one can brag about it at Indian parties. This is actually true. I'm not sure if I'm going to get backlash for saying that, but this is my perspective and my story. Maybe that's an extreme view, but that was my personal experience of my childhood and accolades or lack thereof. Luckily, as I grew up and I learned to love and trust myself in order to make decisions, and I will talk about self-love in a future episode. But notice I said learn, because self-love and trust are not automatic. They actually have to be learned and practiced. It wasn't until my 30s that I realized my entire existence had been dedicated to proving myself. Another form of people-pleasing, proving myself to the world and my family. Once I got into medical school, I proved I was smart and successful. Once I got married and I married the right person on paper, I could prove I made good decisions, and so on and so forth. But even then, when all the boxes were checked, when society perhaps would look at me and think I had the perfect life, I was still dissatisfied and unhappy. When I was in attending, I said yes to everything 100% of the time. I didn't want to seem difficult. I wanted them to like me. I wanted them to know I was a hard and dedicated worker. So today, I've realized that I don't need to people please at work. My hard work shows for itself, and I really need to take care of myself and not put other people's needs in front of my own at my own expense. And I want you to be able to do the same. One of the most difficult things for women to do is to say no. We are nurturing, accommodating, and not used to putting our own needs first. I first considered saying no when it didn't suit me after reading a New York Times article on the power of no. I didn't even consider this concept until I became a full-time working mother. Once I became a mother, I no longer had space to say yes to everything. I still found it very difficult to say no to people. Maybe it was part of the narrative in my head, but I assumed that people would think I was difficult if I said no. When I realized that I couldn't control other people's opinions of me, only my own, I felt empowered and liberated. And I want you to feel the same way. I am a recovering yes person. I'll never forget my first time saying no. I was on my way home, looking forward to hopping on my Peloton. I had found exercise to be an endorphin-boosting activity for me, really giving me energy. It was so good for me. And a senior partner texted me while I was on my way home to see an admission. I was one exit away from home. I took a second to decide, was I going to forego my time working out, which I knew would have a good ripple effect on the rest of my day? Or would I sacrifice that and see the patient, see the admission? So after reading it, I actually said no. And I went home and I rode my bike. And honestly, I have no regrets about that. But at the time, I felt so guilty. But I did it anyway. I really want you to think about getting comfortable with the discomfort, because this is a key part of feeling inner peace. So even though I felt guilty, it was so uncomfortable to say no, I did it anyway, and it ended up being the right thing for me. And you know what? I bet my senior partner didn't even remember asking me this, and he probably doesn't remember that time I said no. So I challenge you to practice the power of no. Say no to self-sacrifice, and you will find that with time, you actually just start letting go. A few weeks ago, I found my people-pleasing tendency creeping in again. The office manager asked me to pick up an extra day of work, and I said, sure, no problem. An hour later, I realized that I had a coaching retreat going on that day that I wanted to attend, and I really wouldn't be able to do a full day of work plus that. It was going to be too much for me. And the retreat was my priority. So I actually called her back and told her, hey, I'm so sorry. My calendar actually has a coaching retreat on it. I didn't realize. And could you reduce my amount of work to maybe go to one place? And do you know what she said? No problem. And the funny thing is, me from several years ago, I wouldn't have dared to do that. I would have stressed myself out trying to fit it all in and had a horrible day. But I actually had the guts to say, hey, I'm sorry I made a mistake. Can I work less? And it was fine. I'm so much happier now because I can actually live life on my own terms. I'm in control, and I'm in control of my own happiness. It's constant practice and work, but it's so worth it. I'm going to dive into how to stop people pleasing and start getting happy. So here goes. Acknowledgement. Acknowledge you're a people pleaser. List out all the ways in which you find yourself people pleasing. Practice saying and getting comfortable with saying no. It really takes practice, and it takes a long time before you'll feel comfortable, believe me. If something makes you uncomfortable, realize it's okay to not participate. And stop explaining yourself, because you don't owe the world explanations for your choices or your life. It's your life. Practice people-pleasing on yourself. What would make you happy? What would make you think highly of yourself? When you find yourself thinking, do they like what I did, or do they like me for doing that? Ask yourself if you like you for doing that. And again, the problem with people-pleasing is that it is outside of us. We have zero control, actually, on pleasing others. And often when we sacrifice ourselves and our own happiness for other people, we are left feeling depleted. Other people's stories reflects on them, not on you, and you can't control it. No one can actually know the right decision for you because they're not in your shoes and they don't know what you go through on a daily basis. Only you know. Self-focus and trust are also components of fulfillment and peace. They are the antidote to people-pleasing. We need to look at ourselves and learn to trust ourselves on having the answers. It is difficult, but with time, we can learn to trust ourselves and realize that we are in control. Instead of focusing on what others think, let's focus on ourselves. And you know what's funny about this? It's actually often just harder to look within and look at ourselves. And I think that's why so many of us often try and focus on other people or things outside of ourselves because it's hard to take a look in. But with some effort, we can shift our perspective and decide to pull inward and look within. For the answers, for what is right, for fulfilling ourselves, for loving ourselves. Only then can we truly be at peace. So here are some lessons in people-pleasing. Remember, we have the answers always. Self-validation is of the utmost importance in self-fulfillment. Self-focus and self-love is more helpful than looking outside of ourselves. Let's keep that in our minds as we acknowledge how people-pleasing gives our power away to other people. Instead, let's turn inwards and get our own approval. And while we're doing that, being aware and getting rid of negative self-talk. The people who know, love, and accept you, they always will, regardless of you, quote unquote, pleasing them. We can create our own ease in our lives, and that actually has a ripple effect with those around us. We must constantly practice. I had a client who, before coaching, she came to me thinking she wanted to move closer to her family. After coaching, we laser focused on the vision of what she wanted in her life, and she realized that she was good where she was. She didn't want to move. She only wanted to move to make her parents happy, but that's not what was going to fulfill her. So remember, the first step to remedying the practice of people-pleasing is acknowledging you're doing it, then practicing seeking your own approval again and again. How so? Well, ask yourself, does this behavior or decision align with who I am? Does it align with my values? Am I in integrity with loving myself when I make this choice? Or, what would I do if I cared for myself? What would I tell a friend to do? Eliminating people-pleasing really starts with a no. We must stand guard to the doorway of our minds and create a sieve, not necessarily taking in everyone's input on something. Managing our mind, looking within, deciding what we want, regardless of what other people think, and going after it. And don't forget the power of no. Try any and all of these tips and let me know how it goes. If you want to take a deeper dive into this life-changing work, book a free 30-minute consultation call with me to get started. www.priancanaikmdcoaching.as.me. That's PRIANCANAIKMD coaching.as.me. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Empowering Working Moms podcast, Real Talk with Dr. Prianca Naik. If you are ready to get unstuck and out of survival mode to live your best life, I want to invite you to book a free 30-minute consultation call with me. To get started, visit priankanaikmdcoaching.as.me. Link in the show notes.